Welcome to Hot Topics. I would like to remind you to become a subscriber to our channel if you feel like these videos are helping you in any way. But in today's video, we're going to look at the main bonding jumper that you see in this illustration 16-31 from Stallcup's Electrical Design Book, Volume 2. Now, the code has kind of changed down through the years. For example, the 1993 NEC 250-53B with other sections kind of said a supplement. And this was the problem. We would have a screw here that was the bonding means. And we have that in 250.28 when we look at it. And basically, when you review those sections, that's under construction, I believe it is, that you would find that in 250.28B, I believe it is. But what would happen here before the 1999 NEC, when the main bonding jumper was relocated, when they completely rewrote Article 350. And they more addressed grounding services, separately derived systems, and where you routed from one building to another building to set up a panel in a second building and so forth. And they kind of addressed the code in that manner, and then added the other sections in to accommodate that concept. But what would happen, some of the old electricians, and I'm not talking about old electricians now, it's just a habit that we had, that we didn't trust this screw as much. An electrician would add a conductor based upon the size of the lug. If it would take number 6, that's what they used. If it's number 8, they'd use number 8, see. But when Joe Pipkin became a member of NFPA 70E, he was the director of OSHA, he had a question. He said, now, why is that bonding jumper so small? And of course, some of the engineers on the committee said, well, Joe, we did that just in case there come some corrosion or restriction area, and what that screw wouldn't take, the conductor would supplement it, see? And, he said, well, wait a minute, what if that screw become completely crystallized, had a resistance where no current passed, would you need a larger conductor there, see? So naturally, when the code was rewritten and they started reviewing it, they did the supplement rule through there kind of disappeared, and they would look at the left of the illustration where it has table 250.102C1. Well, what they did see in the 1999 NEC, they put a section in 250.28D as in dog 1, and said the smallest size, that conductor, grounded conductor, the main bonding jumper, if you used a conductor to supplement the screw, had to be sized by table 250.102C1, which then was table 250.66 in the past, see. So if you had, say, 350 kc mil at the service panel board here, say, hitting a 300 amp main, then I'd look at 350, go to table 250.102C1, and I would have to have a number 2 there. Or you don't supplement it. You just leave the screw. And then, of course, the screw under construction, they said, well, it had to have a green head. So as an electrician, you see that green screw there, you knew right away that was your main bonding jumper. And then they went to 250.30A as in ample 1 for a separately derived system, and said that's not a main bonding jumper, that is a system bonding jumper, meaning it was on the load side of the service and had to have a overcurrent device ahead of the conductors, feeding the transformer. Only at the service would it be called a main bonding jumper. So we would want to look at 250.28 for the main bonding jumper. But for a separately derived system, you'd look at 250.30, A as in apple, 1. Now, basically, what they did when they rewrote this Article 250 is they took this main bonding jumper and put it in 250.28A through D. And of course, A deals with material. And, it could be a screw, a strap, a conductor, whatever. It lists the items that could be used as a main bonding jumper coming out the gate in 250.28A. And then, of course, B dealt with the construction. And then, it had to have naturally a green head and easy to identify. Used to it, it'd either be a little different configuration head, it'd be a larger head than the rest of them, or it wouldn't have anything under it at all. And that's how we would recognize it. And a lot of people just didn't, electricians, were taught different, and they put a conductor there and terminate it in. And then you'd need to look at 250.8, 250.10, and 250.12 if you're going to do that. So you'd have to look at those three sections. Very important if you're going to make an attachment like that. And then, of course, if we looked at C part, well, that was the attachment. And when you get under the attachment of the main bonding jumper, then I suggest that you look, again, I'll repeat it, 250.8, 250.10, and 250.12. And then, of course, when we get into D, you get into the sizing of this bonding jumper if it's a conductor. And that's when it refers you to the table 250.102C1 is a repeat, 250.28, D is in dog 1. Then you go look at D2, D3. They talk about the separately derived system. You go over to 250.30. And then naturally, you look at 250.30, A1 and A2 when you deal with the system bonding jumper. And then you pretty well have those two, not that you already didn't have it in your mind, but they're different. So, but however, they're sized in the same way. So as we said before, if you had 350 kC mill here, 300 amp main, then the minimum size grounded conductor from 250.102C1, as you see to the left here of the illustration, would be a number 2. And say you had 2 standard lock nuts and a bushing, and you had a lug on the metal bushing, then that would be number 2 also if you bonded that in. And then if you used you supplemented the screw there, the metal screw for the main bonding jumper, green head today, that'd have to be number 2 also. And then if you connected the grounding electrode conductor to structural steel or a metal water pipe, then that's the only time your table 250.66 applies, isn't it? When you're sizing this grounding electrode conductor. But if you connected it to a driven rod, then 250.66A, it'd be number 6. So you could use 6. If you connected it to a concrete encased electrode, it could be number 4. If you connected it to a ground ring, it would be number 2. So now we picked this up in 250.66A, B, and C, and 250.52, and I believe it's A3 there that you would look at, or A4 right in there. And then, of course, you know that table 250.102C1 is basically an overlay of table 250.66. But engineer says, well, table 250.66 deals with the grounding electrode conductor. Why in the world for a separately derived system bonding jumper, and main bonding jumper, you're referring to that table 250.66 when it's a grounding electrode conductor? Very confusing to everybody. So they suggested that we use table 250.102C1, a new table that listed the items that were in addition to the grounding electrode conductor, such as the grounded conductor, a conductor used for a main bonding jumper, a supply side system bonding jumper from a metal lug on a metal bushing that comes down and connects the conduit in, where you maybe had some punched out rings left, or maybe you even had a clean hole, but you were using standard lock nuts and bushings there, see. And you know, we picked that up in 250.92B as in boy. But the main thing we want to realize, there's a difference between the main bonding jumper and a system bonding jumper for a separately derived system. They're different terms, but you size them the same way. And that if you want to supplement a screw used as a main bonding jumper, which is allowed, you know, in your 250.28A and B, then you could do that. But it has to be full size. And they did away with that rule. And believe it or not, they did away with that rule back in the 1999 NEC. Before then, with that supplement business, people got confused and said, well, we're just supplementing. And that's when Joe Pipkin, the director of OSHA, said, no, it's got to be full size if you use it. So that's what this illustration and the text in Stallcup's Electrical Design Book, Volume 2, Figure 16-31, is illustrating to the user of the NEC.